I am Dutch. And about a week ago, on May the 5th, we celebrated Liberation Day. It marks the end of the German occupation of the Netherlands during the Second World War. This made me wonder, when and how did the Second World War end? After some quick googling, it turns out there isn't an easy answer. How does one end a war? If you're like George Bush, you just declare mission accomplished and start withdrawing troops. But yeah. In the Second World War there were multiple nations fighting each other and they fought until a nation surrendered. The first real end of the Second World War was early May 1945. After the suicide of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, the man in charge in Germany was Karl Dönitz. After withdrawing from some countries like the Netherlands on the 5th of May, Dönitz sent one of his generals to negotiate with the Allied forces on the 6th. We have lost and we would like to surrender. Here are our conditions. But Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower replied, "Yeah, wait, what? Your conditions? We want unconditional surrender." It took a couple of days, but near the midnight of the 8th of May the surrender came into effect. This day became known as WWII Day, which stands for Victory Europe. Funny fact, because of an hour time zone difference, it was already past midnight in the Soviet Union, so they celebrate WWII Day on the 9th of May. The second end of the Second World War came much later. Allied forces were still fighting Japan. The Allied forces slowly but surely fought itself towards the mainland of Japan. But things quickly changed on the 6th of August. The United States dropped Little Boy, the first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, Japan had another big blow to endure. The second atomic bomb, Fat Man, fell on Nagasaki. And also, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan that same day. The following day, Japan communicated that it wanted to surrender, and all around the world people started to celebrate. So did the American soldiers stationed on Okinawa. They had endured one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific, and when they heard about the likely surrender, they took every weapon they could find and shot into the air to celebrate. Unfortunately, this killed 6 soldiers and wounded many others. 6 days later, on the 15th of August, Emperor Hirohito officially announced that Japan would surrender according to the Potsdam Declaration. To most, this day became known as VJ Day, Victory Japan. Australia celebrates it as VP Day, Victory of the Pacific. And with the time zone difference, it was still the 14th of August in America, so they celebrate the victory over Japan on the 14th instead of the 15th. But did this really end the war? In 1945, you have to remember, there were no cell phones, no internet and no satellite communications. People didn't get a tweet or a CNN breaking news update. There were still groups fighting that didn't have a clue that the war had ended. Or they knew their leaders had surrendered, but they just didn't want to surrender themselves. Especially in the Pacific, groups of Japanese soldiers had been dropped on remote islands. They had the order to fight, never surrender and wait for reinforcements. When the Allied forces dropped leaflets telling the soldiers that the war had ended, most of these groups dismissed it as Western propaganda. They kept fighting, surviving on coconuts and sabotaging farms, roads and bridges. Some groups kept fighting for the entire year 1945 and even the year after that. There was a group of 18 soldiers on the island of Anatahan that surrendered as late as 1951. And if you think that was strange, read the stories about Hiro Onoda, a Japanese lieutenant fighting in the Philippines that was finally found and convinced that the war was over in March 1974, a whopping 29 years after the surrender of Japan. So, when did the Second World War end? After all the Axis nations surrendered? After the last fighting? I think Linkin Park was right all along. In the end, it doesn't even matter. For some people the war will never end and they have to live with it until they die. And now you know.